In the previous demonstration, we saw how malware made a connection to a command and control server and it requested an HTML page. And also we saw how the malware was trying to extract the string within the div tag. That is, it was looking for this string div safe colon followed by a space and then space balance greater than. Anything between this, that is this string, was taken, it was decrypted, and then after decryption it checked for the first character, and based on the first character it did something. In the previous demo we saw that it took a string within this div tag and it decrypted and it checked if the first character is J. If the first character was J, then it went and slept. So it went so then that's how we determine the sleep functionality of the malware. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm giving a div tag again. I'm configured inetsim to give a div tag. This time I've configured it to give a different string. The idea is so that I can determine the second functionality of the malware. Okay, so let's go back to our Windows machine, and the malware is now ready to make a connection. If you remember, the user agent is this, a hard-coded string followed by my host name, and once after that it makes an HTTP connection to a URL. And if you remember, it made an HTTP connection to this URL here, http crownsgolf.org/css/about.html. Now after I run this, you will see that there is a connection to crownsgolf.org which resolved to this IP address, and then it made a connection on port 80 as expected. And then you see that inetsim responded back with this tag here with this HTML content, and also notice that I configured inetsim to give this tag back. And now we know that whatever is between div safe colon space and balance, that is this string, malware is going to extract this, it is going to decrypt it, and it's going to use it as a command. In this case, let's see how malware is going to use it, use this string. Okay, so now we have paused the internet read file, which is the API call which is used to read from the internet. Now if you remember, after I run this function, it will read the HTML content. As you can see here, it read the HTML content from the inetsim, and you see that we have this tag here, div safe colon, and this encrypted string. Okay, so let's see how malware uses this. Then if you remember, it calls this function check div tag. The job of this function is to check if there is a div followed by safe colon space, and then also it checks that if there is a balance greater than. Okay, so if this tag is present, if you remember, it extracts the content between this, that is divs, anything that is between div safe colon space and balance, that is this particular string here, kxa IKU, this string, and then you see that it passes that string to the decrypt function. So let's look at the first parameter to this function. You see that it successfully extracted the string that was between that is this string here, kxa, this string. You see that it extracted that, and then it is passing to the decrypt function, and after executing that function, it is stored in a buffer which is this buffer. So let me execute this function, and you see that it decrypted to a string something like this, do http some URL. Okay, now after decrypting, if you remember, it first checks to see if the first character of the decrypted output is capital J. In our case, it is not capital J. If it is not capital J, if you remember, it will check if the first character is capital D. In our case, the first character is capital D. That's exactly the reason why I configured inetsim to give this particular string, because I've already analyzed this sample. I know that this string will decrypt to a string whose first character will be capital D. Okay, in this case it is capital D. Then if it is capital D, what it will do is it will check if the next character is small case o. Okay, in this case it is O. So now let's see what malware does. In this case, what happens is if the first character is D, second character is O, what it will do is starting from the third character till the null byte, that is http://divc2.com/a.exe. So it will use that as the URL. Okay, and then if you remember, the return value of this function is 1. And if you remember from the previous demonstration, if the return value is 1, which means the malware was able to successfully extract the encrypted string from the div tag and was able to successfully decrypt it. Okay, so once that is done, it comes out of the function. It will check if the return value is 0. If it is not equal to 0, in this case it is not equal to 0, what it will do is it is taking a different path here. So if you remember in the previous demonstration, if the first character was capital J, it went ahead and slept. In this case, because the first character was D and the second character was O, it took a different path. In this case, what it's doing is it is calling the get temp path to get the path to the temporary files. Okay, so let's see here. After running this function, you see that it got the full path to the temporary files, that is C users test app data local temp. Okay, so once it gets the temporary path, next what the malware is going to do is it is going to call this get temp file name function. So what this function does is the first parameter to this function is that path to the temporary directory, and the second parameter will tell, that is it'll tell to create a file with a prefix of win. Okay, now in this case, let me go to the temp directory here. If you see here, there is no file which starts with the string win in this case. So after I run this function, you will see that a file will get created whose file name starts with the character win. Okay, so let me run this function. You see that in the temp directory there is a file, 0kb file, that got created whose first 3 characters is win, and then it immediately deletes this file. Okay, so it immediately deletes this file here, the file that it created. So the idea of calling this function was that to just get this path, okay, just get this path to the file, and then it is immediately deleting this file. Okay, so after I run this function, you will see that the win file getting deleted. So let me run this function. You see that the file was deleted. Okay, and then but the file that it created, what it does is it removes the temp extension. In this case, the file that it created and it got deleted was this win754e.temp. So this temp extension is replaced with .exe extension, and then what happens is it calls this function URL download to file, whose second parameter will tell, okay, whose second parameter is an URL. So this API call, basically what it does is it downloads a file from a URL. In this case, it is going to download a file a.exe from this URL divc2.com. Okay, and it is going to download this file and save it onto a disk. The third parameter will tell you what is the name with which it is going to save. In this case, it is going to download the file and save it with this name. If you remember, it called that function temp file name function. It created this file, it got the name, it replaced the temp with the .exe, and it created this string. And then it is going to this URL and it is going to download this file, and once downloaded, it is going to create a file in this directory, that is in the temp directory, with this particular name. So now we know that this is acting as a downloader. Okay, so which means the content from the div tag that the malware extracted after decrypting, if the first character is D, it's a command to the malware to download an additional file. So let's run this function, and you see that there is a file that got created, win754e.exe. Now it's a 24 KB file. Okay, so it downloaded from the command and control server. Once downloaded, what it does is basically it is going to create a process, and the second parameter tells you what is the file that will get executed to create the process, and it is this file that it downloaded from the command and control server that it's going to execute. Okay, so after I run this function, you see that we got a alert. So this is inetsim default binary. So what happened here was, if you remember, we did not allow the malware to connect to the actual command and control server, but we were simulating the services using inetsim. So when the malware tried to contact this domain, let me go to the packet capture here. When it tried to contact that domain, which is, if you remember, divc2.com, and when our inetsim gave a fake response saying that divc2.com is at this particular IP address, then it went ahead and did an HTTP communication, which is the communication to download a.exe from divc2.com. And one more thing inetsim did was, because it noticed that the malware was requesting an executable file, it gave a fake binary. Okay, so as you can see here, it gave a fake binary, and if you remember, the malware downloaded the executable and it executed this executable. Now it basically executed this fake binary here. So that's exactly what you're seeing here. This is the pop-up from the fake executable. But even though this is a fake executable, but using this technique, we were able to determine the functionality of the malware. Now we know that the malware took this string from the div tag, this tag, it extracted this string, it decrypted it, and then if the first character of the decrypted string is capital D, what it does is it goes and checks for the second character, which to see if it is O. If the second character is O, then it starting from the third character, it'll treat that as an URL. For example, let me run the decryptor, and you see that. Let me show the script as well here. As you can see, the string that I'm passing is the string that is within the div tag here, and after running that, see, it decrypts to this. So what malware is doing is it is trying to check if the first character is capital D. If the first character is capital D, then it will check if the second character is DO. Probably it is a command to the malware to download. DO stands for probably download. And then if the first two character is DO, then it treats the string starting from the third character as an URL, and it will use that URL to download an executable file from the command and control server. Once downloaded, it will execute that executable file. Now, just to show you, in this case, so at this point, we were able to determine the functionality of the malware using reverse engineering.